Okay, hi everybody. My name is Anna Rosmanit. I come from the DMP, the edX, and I'm really happy to present today for you Umberto. He's one of the co-founders from Silverbullet, and I really like the title, Fight Against the Cookie Monster, and I'm really looking forward to an interesting discussion together with Aline, one of his colleagues, and Philip from Pilot, one of the premium partners. So welcome on stage, everybody, and enjoy yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Umberto Torrielli. I'm one of the co-founders of Silverbullet and the Chief Strategy Officer. They asked me if I wanted a microphone today, and I'm like, I'm Italian, so I need both of my hands to do this presentation, otherwise it doesn't, it doesn't suit me. So here we're today talking about how do we, as Silverbullet, a business which I'll explain about in a little bit, how do we support our brands with regards to, and our clients with regards to what we think are the foundational steps required to, fight back against the cookie monster. So we're all aware, of course, that we're here today to talk about the third-party cookie deprecation, and we're all kind of sick of hearing about it, and I appreciate it. I'm sick of it myself. But I think there's some fundamental steps that we can take together in order to really address the fact that third-party cookie deprecation is inevitable, and what can we do about it, right? I'll be joined later by Aline and Philip, who I'll introduce a little bit later, for a little panel discussion. So let's get started. I appreciate that you might not all know Silverbullet, so I'll have a little video for you. We have some music, get the blood pumping a little bit, so I'll play that now. I never know what to do when this is playing, but I'll just sit here and watch it. So now that we got the music going, I'll ask you to do a bit of aerobics with me, which is just really lifting your hand up, to be honest. So if you can start by raising your hand if you're tired of hearing about the death of the cookie. Yeah, everyone, right, exactly, me too. You can keep your hand up or raise it again if you, as a business, are already preparing for this inevitable demise. How do you feel about that? Are you guys doing something about it already, or about half the room? Okay, and if you don't have a plan or don't know where to start, lift your hand. That's okay, by the way, there's no judging here. No one. Everyone knows what to do. Okay, perfect. I'm leaving then. All right. So look, let's start with a reset here. The reality is we all know why we got here, but I think it's worth just discussing briefly, what happened to get to this point. And so the reality is we've spent the last decade and a half really, or a little bit more rather, leveraging technologies and infrastructures that relied on something which fundamentally wasn't right. We all knew it wasn't right, third-party cookies, right? But we all used them because there was nothing else. And so the reality is, over the past kind of decade and a half, you've had these regulations that have been tightening, privacy and consumer focus has been at the forefront. Everyone knows that no one wants to be tracked by ads. It's quite intrusive, and consumers always complain about the next pop-up ad and so on and so forth. And so this has all come to the forefront now, where GDPR, of course, is the major legislation that everyone is aware of that has heralded in this era of kind of the post-cookie future. But reality is, Germany has been one step ahead, right? I know for a fact because I used to work for a company called BlueKai, which you might be familiar with. BlueKai now is part of Oracle. Actually, I don't even know if BlueKai exists anymore at this point. But back in the heyday or the glory days of BlueKai and the DMP space specifically, talk about let's say 7, 8, 9 years ago when we were heavily presenting BlueKai as a product to the various European markets. The reality was that I remember intrinsically that Germany, and when we had conversations with the German clients and prospects, was always a bit skeptical about the third-party data that we had in the BlueKai platform. And I remember a lot of pushback at the time around, well, that's great, you guys are coming here with all your third-party data and all these use cases, but we can't really use it here. And that was always a problem. And so for a problem, at least as far as BlueKai was concerned, but of course, not a problem as far as Germany being ahead of the game in terms of understanding the requirements for data privacy, consumer privacy, and advocacy for consumer rights. So you had an alliance early days called NetID, which you may or may not be familiar with at this point, which, for example, was put together by publishers here, a consortium of publishers, to help support kind of content from a publisher perspective and making sure that that content wasn't being violated by third-party companies and tech giants, so to speak. Having said that, and despite the fact that, of course, again, you had these legislations in place before GDPR was even a four-word acronym that we all now know so well, according to a survey that was conducted last year, 41% of Germans, feel confident about sharing their data. That's not a huge percentage. And if you look at the 18 to 25 age range, it's only 20% that are okay with giving up their data in return for essentially a reward. Now, what does a reward mean? Of course, a reward could be something that you get back as part of a sweepstakes or something like that. But inherently, what we mean by reward is the ability to consume content. We are all consumers, which sounds funny when I say that, but really people use the internet. And most people that are not in our industry don't understand the value exchange that happens when they consume content online. We're just used to, as individuals, to going online and reading about the latest news or latest food recipes or the latest sports videos. And we don't appreciate, if we're not in this industry, that actually the only reason why we can consume that content without paying for it necessarily is because it's subsidized by advertisements, right? And so that's the value exchange that we talk about, that we need to, as a business and as an industry, really help evangelize to our consumers. And so that's all about trust, right? If you, as a business, have gained the trust of your consumers, customers, let's call them, then you can start to scale that operation, right? That's the idea behind building trust. Now, the fact is, the cookie is gone. I don't know if there's anyone from Google in the room today. Maybe you'll tell me otherwise. But as far as I know, as far as Google has made it clear, finally the cookie is going away as of next year. So let's say we have a window of 12 to 18 months to really sort out what we want to do about it. Now, this might change, but it doesn't feel like it will change, right? I think we had some delays due to needing to work through some of the fundamental infrastructure behind supporting the move away from third-party cookies. Debate for another time as to whether or not we're there yet, but it's going away. And despite what I said earlier about Germany being one step ahead, the truth of the matter is that, again, in the same survey that was conducted last year, German advertisers themselves also acknowledge the fact that there is a gap in terms of the knowledge required to face the cookieless future. So while Germany is a step ahead in terms of the understanding of these legislations, the reality is that we're all kind of in the same place around the knowledge gap that exists and what we need to do about it. And if we just sit on our laurels, so to speak, then we end up risking being in a bit of a pickle, to use a British expression, despite my accent, around what we can do about it. And right when the third-party cookies inevitably do go away, for any of those use cases where we are still relying on them, we're kind of screwed. So what does this kind of new future look like? I won't profess to say that we have the end-all, be-all solution. What I will say is that as a business, we kind of look at things across these three different buckets. And we think this is a fundamental infrastructure that you can take forwards to help build the foundations required to step into this post-cookie future. So first of all, first-party data. Now, when I say first-party data, to be clear, people look at me and they're like, First-party data is first-party data, zero-party data, earned data, whatever you want to call it. The point of it is that it's data that you have gleaned on your customers or consumers that they've given consent for. It's data that you have consent to collect, to use, to scale, and you have built this trustworthy component with your customer to be able to use it across different activation points. Two is, it says CDP here, but really the idea is not necessarily a CDP, but rather a data technology platform, oftentimes in the form of a CDP, that allows you to then pipe that data around to different components of your data infrastructure and activation infrastructure in a compliant way. And third, and not least certainly, is contextual. Now, you might say, well, of course you're talking about contextual because, as you saw in the video, you've built a contextual product. But the reality is we built the contextual product to address this specific area because we felt as though contextual is one of the primary ingredients that helps bring us into the cookieless future from an advertiser perspective, considering that contextual, regardless of what solution you use, is never going to be tied to any IDs or cookies, right? The whole premise of having a contextual solution is that you don't target users and you're not therefore stepping on the toes of privacy, but rather you're targeting the right content based on where the advertisement should run. So let's start with first-party data strategy. There are more than 5 steps, by the way. Obviously, if any of you have worked at an organization that has gone through the process of digital or data transformation, or you're in the process of doing that yourselves at the moment, you'll appreciate that there are many more than 5 steps. But boiled down, I suppose, the way we look at it is, number one, you have to scale that first-party data asset. It's always been instrumental. It's always the most important thing. It's the most valuable asset you have as a business. We all know this. And it's always been true. But moving into a world where we no longer have access to third-party data and third-party cookies, it becomes instrumentally more important. So having the ability to gather consent-driven first-party data and the ability to then scale it is a big requirement. And scaling it doesn't just mean, well, it's easy to say collect more. It means you have to have an infrastructure in place and workflows in place in order to really be able to scale on that data and activate on it. Secondly, additional data points, what we mean by this is you have your first-party data, and that's great. But unless you're a publisher with a really rich kind of set of verticals that you cover, the data you have on your consumers is going to be very kind of single-focused, right? You're going to know about your customer whatever they've given to you, so declaratively, or you're going to know whatever it is that pertains to your product. So if you're an auto manufacturer, you might know that your customers like certain models of cars, but that doesn't tell you much about the customer other than that specific lens. So the idea is that there are technologies out there, which you are probably familiar with. There are data clean rooms, there are other data platforms that allow you to share consent-driven data and enrich your own profiles, of course. Third, so this is an important one because we all know the Lumascape. We've all seen the Lumascape. We're never going to stop seeing the Lumascape. It's never going to go away. The point is that it always gets more and more complicated and complex. And there's a variety of solutions that exist out there. But if you just go and deploy and implement a platform because your competitor did it or because your CMO read about it in the news and you feel like you should be doing it as well, we run into the problem that we ran into at Blue Kai back in the day where everyone was installing, deploying and implementing DMPs left, right, and center. And it was like Oprah. It's like, you have a DMP, you get a DMP, you get a DMP, you get a DMP, and then no one knew what to do with these DMPs. That's the reality. Back in the Blue Kai days. Now, of course, things have evolved, and the DMPs that exist today have survived because they've changed and their infrastructure is scalable for the future. But back, 7, 8, 9 years ago, that was what we were doing. And ultimately, businesses were not getting the ROI out of the investments they were making in these platforms. So the point is that you need to understand what platforms exist and which ones are pertinent to your use cases, and then figure out which ones to leverage and deploy. Reduction on reliance on tech giants. Again, this sounds like I'm bashing, Google and Meta. Not at all. They're partners, and we love them. We work with them, day in, day out. What I mean by that specifically is you have data that you own. It's your data, right? You've earned it, if you want to use that phrase. You've gathered it in a consent-driven way. The truth of the matter is you should be able to be in the driver's seat. So you should be able to distribute that data across different platforms in the ecosystem that you work in, as it suits you. And being over-reliant on one particular stack doesn't enable you to really fulfill the promise of the data you're collecting. And last but not least is there are a number of solutions that are cropping up that help support this idea of moving to the cookieless future. There are ID-based solutions, first-party-based solutions, there are contextual solutions, there are a whole bunch of solutions that exist. I'm not going to say, well, I will say that ours is the best, but I'm biased. My point is that there are many solutions out there, and of course, you should test and learn. Now's the time to do it. It's not, in 12 months. It's now, because otherwise you'll be stuck behind the curve. I'll walk you through an example here of a client that we work with on the data strategy side of things. The reason why I chose this brand in this particular case study is that this is a brand that works in a very difficult environment to collect first-party data. They work in an environment that is CPG or FMCG, depending on which side of the pond you sit on. So CPG brands classically have very little touch points, of course, with their consumers on their digital properties. And few people go to a CPG website to give up their data, willingly at least. That's one. Two is within the liquor or alcohol legislation, as you guys know, it's quite difficult to collect data to begin with, and there are very specific restrictions one has to adhere to. And last but not least, this particular client is one that sits in Brazil. And Brazil, unbeknownst to a lot of people, unless you work in that market, has some very strict regulations around data privacy, very much similar to GDPR, if not more so. So this particular company has an ambition to become the most connected brewery in Brazil, right? And connected means the most consumer records, the most consent-driven data, the most digital touch points with their consumers. That's their ambition. And it's a lofty one because Brazil consumes a lot of alcohol and a lot of beer. But that's what their ambition is. And so to support that ambition, there are basically 4 different steps that we supported them with. One is, how do we accelerate that path? One thing is to say, I want to have 10 million consumer records by the end of 22. Another one is to actually get there. right? And to get there, you have to have a clear framework in place. Two is, as I mentioned, for some of you here might work for businesses that are, either German-based and have offices across the globe, or conversely are international businesses that have a presence in Germany. And there are nuances that you have to respect when you're in a local market. And that's one big mistake that is often made, is not taking into account the local legislations and nuances of the market. Third is, everyone forever will be limited in budget and scope and people, right? I mean, it's a truth. We work with clients, as I'm sure all of you do, that are very, very small and very, very big. And it doesn't really matter. No one has any team, no one has any resource, no one has any money. So how do you work alongside those restrictions? And fourth is, once you have that data, how do you unlock the potential of it? I know, I appreciate that's a catchphrase and simple to say, but there really has to be a defined mechanism to unlock the potential of that data, especially as we move forwards into this third-party cookie-less future. So what we do with our clients, and again, this is a framework that is adoptable for any brand or any advertiser really, is we work through this step of empower, build, activate, or achieve, depending on the use case. And the idea is that we first come up with a clear, defined data strategy. It's important to reassess and evaluate where you are today with your data strategy. A data strategy is not just saying, I have an audience and I can activate it in a DSP. That's like pretty basic, right? The idea is you have to have a comprehensive data strategy that looks at all the different potential data sources, the ones you have access to, the ones you could have access to, assesses all of those, and then creates a defined roadmap to actually enact on that data strategy. So we develop data strategy. We identify partners that can help support the collection of this ever more valuable first-party data set. We create a roadmap that has clear, defined milestones and timelines that we need to adhere to, which is essential when we look at the fact that we're running out of runway with third-party cookies specifically, right, over the next 12 to 18 months. We look at how do we onboard that data. So, as it's one thing, again, to say, I have ambitions to grow my record base by whatever, X. The reality is you have to actually enact that in a way that is timely and done with, specifically in a way that allows you to maximize the amount of time that you have left to collect these records. So we do the onboarding of the data platforms. We manage those platforms where the resource is constrained. And we also help integrate with this particular client, the off-the-shelf solutions, let's call them, into their custom technology stacks. And last but not least, we then activate, right? What does activate mean? It means how do you effectively take that data and activate it across different platforms to create personalized journeys. I mean, whether that's in advertisement and just display programmatics, the most simple thing, so to speak, all the way through customized journeys down to one-to-one messaging with your clients. And I don't know about you guys, maybe because I work in the industry, I feel as though in 2022, there's no reason why we as consumers should not have a personalized journey every time we interact with a brand. We have it, the technology is there, right? All the tech in the world is there. We know how to do it, but yet very few people are doing it. And that's a shame because we have the ability to provide these experiences to our customers and we're not doing it. And then we wonder why consumers are upset about providing their data and being tracked and being retargeted with the old punch the monkey ads. So that's a solution. I'll give you some examples about what we did and helped ideate for this particular client and what we then help put into place. Appreciating that this is one specific example. It is not the end-all be-all. Every client, every vertical, every market is going to be different, obviously. But these are some ideas that we helped generate and then put into place for this particular client. So first of all, we helped create a series of loyalty schemes that were data-driven and that were aligned with some initiatives that the client had for sponsorship of specific events. We helped line up local bars, restaurants, and distributors to help understand the data they had on the consumers of these particular products. And I think the fundamental point here, though, is one thing is to have these relationships in place, but much more importantly, it's the ability to then take that data and put it all into one unified environment. Because if you have data from the distributor and data from the bars and restaurants and data from the venues where you're gathering people that are entering the venues by scanning their QR codes, and then data on your touch points with your digital assets, and it's not unified, then what was the point of doing it to begin with? The idea is that you have to have the data unified so you can actually analyze it, understand it, see what the patterns are of consumption of your products, and then use that as an opportunity to go get more data and to then provide customized experiences to your clients. This is just a quote, but the idea here is that by putting together these types of programs, this particular brand had the ambition of growing their records from in the tens of thousands to in the low millions within I think 12 months, and I think within 4 to 5 months we basically blew past that from a volume collection perspective, and we did something like 3 or 4x what their expectations were. And it's not magic, by the way. It's just having a framework and knowing how to apply it. For the second bit, so we talked about data strategy a little bit. The second bit was around platforms, right? So how do you unify that data? And then what are some of the use cases and benefits of unifying that data as we look and move forwards into this cookieless future? Rather than me talk more, I will play a video now from one of our clients. He has an Australian accent, so it might be arguably more difficult than mine, but there are subtitles. I can't understand it personally. And so this is an example specifically around a company called Network 10, which is a big publisher in Australia. And I'll play this in a minute, but ultimately this will help demonstrate a little bit the kind of work that we do to help support our clients with regards to deploying platforms that are data-centric. So I'll play that now.
Hi, my name is Josh Slighting. I'm Head of Data and Digital Audience for Network 10. I look after everything data and analytics for 10's newly established data division. Part of the complexity of the ecosystem that we operate in is that there's such a big array of ways that people could watch our content. And the thing that we need to make sure that we're doing very well is that people can see content consistently regardless of the platform that they're trying to watch us on. If it's on a mobile device, if it's on a website, or if it's on a connected TV. For us, connected TVs is a massive growth area. The market's growing around 60% year on year. And so us trying to keep up with the pace of these technologies is very challenging. So we chose Silverbullet because we needed a partner with relevant experience. The technologies that we're adopting and the way that we are implementing things is quite complicated and it is quite new. So getting a partner who had relevant experience doing things on the platforms that we needed them to was very important for us. The solution that we required was the adoption and implementation of our CDP technology and our DMP technology, and we needed to implement that across 7 different platforms. And that included mobile devices and connected TVs, which are vastly different from a typical implementation that you'd see on a website or a mobile app on its own. We also needed an audit of our existing technology setup to make sure that the things that we built historically were done correctly. And if there were any opportunities for efficiencies and improvements, we really wanted to hear about that. So we asked Silverbullet to look at those things for us in totality, and they delivered against those very, very well.
We feel that Silverbullet was the right fit for Network 10 because we're a broad agency and we can help on strategic business goals, we can help with their internal resourcing, and we can help on the technology and the data solutions as well.
The results that we've been able to see has been the acceleration of our data capabilities across 7 different platforms, and that's allowed us to monetize our audiences going from 20% to 85% in the same time frame. So it's really positive. We also have a very confident view of our setup now going into next year, which is very important for us.
We're really excited as Network 10 grows. They've got foundational capabilities now and they're going to advance those capabilities. Over the next year or two, we'll see additional use cases built into the solution, and we feel that we've future-proofed that solution as Network 10 grows and changes.
What I see in the future for 10 is moving to much more advanced data-driven capabilities. We now have a much stronger foundation on which to build things, which is important because if we're trying to go back and unpick things in the future, it becomes hard. We need to continue to personalize experiences and do more testing. We also launched a bunch of new ad formats that are fairly premium and exclusive, and that's going to give us a lot of creative opportunity and ways to test and use this great setup that we now have. There's lots of good things for us to come next year.
Great. So hopefully that gives you a view as to kind of some of the work that we do with our clients, and specifically what are the benefits of leveraging a unified data strategy in a platform like a CDP, by the way, accompanied with the DMP in their particular use case, to help increase yield for a publisher. So we've talked about the importance of first-party data strategy. We've talked about having a platform or platforms that help support that. And the third thing we're going to talk about is how do we then activate those audiences that are so important and valuable in a cookieless way, right? And how do we then wrap that all together? So what we'll talk about now is this idea that you have this data, and how do you then, again, activate it in a way that is completely disassociated or disambiguated from IDs and therefore third-party cookies. And the idea is that you can blend these first-party data signals and assets with advanced contextual solutions. So what we talk about at Silverbullet with our product called 4D is this idea of contextual genomes, which I'll show you a brief demo of. I think I could just flip to the browser somehow. Yeah, that's it. Cool, thank you. No, I think it's still showing the presentation mode.
That's because PowerPoint sometimes.
So while this is loading, no worries. Cool. Okay. So the idea is very much that by having, again, I'm not going through a platform demo here necessarily, but just to show you the concept of once you have first-party data that has been gathered, collected, it's consent-driven, privacy compliant, and so on and so forth, how do you translate that into essentially what we call these contextual genomes or proxies for lookalike models? One of the biggest use cases for third-party data historically has been, despite the quality of third-party data, we can talk about that in a separate forum, but the idea is that you would create a first-party audience, then create a lookalike model based off of third-party data, and then therefore extend and scale your audience. We can't do that anymore, right, in the future. Probably really haven't been able to do that in Germany anyways, but the reality is you can't really do that moving forwards without third-party cookies and that foundational framework. So what we can do is we can actually take these first-party signals, we can onboard them, and then we can essentially deploy a tag into media that is essentially creating this contextual genome, which is the idea of what is the content consumption pattern of where my users are seeing my brand and content. And beyond just seeing where the brands, where the ad is being seen in content, it's all about understanding deterministically in a post-bid manner, what is the content that resonates with my users? Why is someone clicking on my ad more when they're seeing my advertisement in a particular theme or sentiment of a page versus another? And we can then take that data and use that to optimize the context back in pre-bid to create a bit of a self-fulfilling loop. So the idea is we take first-party data, we understand how to target that contextually, we run the contextual targeting pre-bid, we analyze it post-bid, and then we use that information to, again, inform and change the composition of the context back in pre-bid. All this is happening in real time. That data then allows you to make some decisions around what are the keywords I should be targeting, what are the themes that I should be running against, what are some of the thematics I should stay away from, and this is all deterministic data that is first party and that you then own as a business. The beauty of all this is that you can then take this data and use it to enrich your profiles in the CDP or the DMP. So if you have a CDP where you're collecting data already, of course, the idea is that you can take this contextual data, which is not associated to any IDs, and you can help inform profiles through mechanisms that we've developed through the integrations that we have. So it's a very strong means to essentially take data that you've collected and that you've earned, it's been difficult to collect, that you've scaled, that you've added into a platform like a CDP, and you can now activate cookielessly without having to wait for the deprecation of third-party cookies. And you can use all that data to then inform your marketing campaigns and your marketing orchestration. So that is what this platform allows you to do. Again, there are other contextual platforms. I would recommend obviously testing, as I said earlier, and learning which ones work for you. But ultimately, the idea is if you can take first-party data and translate that into cookieless contexts and then apply those in a cookieless environment and learn from them, then you've future-proofed your business. So with that in mind, I'll go back to the presentation here, which I think might be in a different mode, but that's okay. No worries.
You were here?
Yeah, it's like we can go down here.
This one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So summing this all up, so to speak, this is kind of our view of what the new refined post-cookie marketing age looks like. It starts with designing first-party data strategy. You then have to find a way to ingest, unify, and normalize that data in a platform. Could be a CDP, could be other data technology, it could be your own database. You then can generate these powerful insights to deliver and personalize marketing automation and advertising campaigns. You add into the mix contextual and or other data signals. And last but not least, you can then drive kind of business outcomes at scale that are measurable and tangible, which I think is the main takeaway here is anything we do as a business should be measurable and tangible. We should not just deploy things and spend money and not measure their success, which happens very often, unfortunately. So with that in mind, I'm done talking-ish for a little bit. I will invite to the stage Aline Zenzes, who is our MD for Northern Europe, and Philippe Chadevald, who is the Director of Programmatic for Pilot. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Umberto. That was really good. And I'm so happy you spoke so slowly.
That's slow for me, by the way.
It was really good. So despite the fact that I have the pink seat, looks like the hot seat, I'm going to ask my colleagues a couple of questions. And hopefully the audience might have a question or two as well. Right, so let's start with the fact that we're talking about the preparation of a cookieless future. So what would you guys think are the 3 major innovations over the next 24 months to look at?
First of all, well, thanks for being here in a cinema these days.
Yes.
Back in a cinema, and then just in the front row. Let's say it could be 3.5 or 4 solutions or
Go
main
for it.
areas.
Yes.
So as we heard, everyone in the audience knows how to go into the cookies future. So it's maybe boring, my answer, but first of all, I guess we all need the identifiers, such as NetID, ID5, and some other market players who will come up, and that will be interesting. How this will work in this market. Will it be a consolidation, or will it be a fragmentation of identifiers on the market, on the German or on the European market? Second, attribution modeling. I think this is also a big thing the next 2 years. How can we attribute within a cookieless future or cookieless world? And then third, of course, the first-party data. So dear clients, dear German clients, don't be afraid of using your first-party data, because you are using Google platforms, you are using Facebook, you are using Amazon. So don't be afraid of using them. And 3.5 or fourth, you need also the inventory part. So the publishers who also have to do their homework to create content where you have context and where you can put those technologies like 4D on it to have a scalability. When you look at B2B, when you look at pharmacy content, we need to have a scalability.
Perfect. Umberto, you want to add?
No, I agree with all the above. I think specifically the 3 areas of innovation from a tech perspective that we'll likely see, but you just touched on 2 of the 3 that I was going to mention. One is definitely contextual solutions. Of course, we're seeing an explosion of those and the various permutations of them. 2 is the ID solutions. Again, you touched on that, but I think we're still waiting to see who's going to win the ID wars. That's a new thing now, the ID wars. It's like everything. There's always a new one, but I think we're still waiting to see how that's going to shake out, and there are different opportunities there, I suppose. And the third, I think, is we're going to see an evolution. This is my personal opinion, an evolution of the consent management platforms. So the CMPs, because we always need a new acronym. There are several CMPs that are leading in the space, but I think they're going to evolve to something that is also going to be akin to or hybrid to a CDP. So I think we're starting to see the move of these CMPs towards the CDP space. It'll be interesting to see where that shakes out, but I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around that.
Perfect, thank you. So before going to the second question, I would just like to ask the audience, so who is working with a DMP or a CDP already? Okay, just a couple of hands. Okay, so actually, then that makes this a really good question. Maybe Philip, how are you a pilot currently leveraging your your client's first-party data through technology, or what kind of technologies you're using?
I mean, it depends on, first of all, as a strategic partner of our clients, we all have to leverage the client needs. But of course, CDPs come up, so there are a few on the market, and we have to check those partners, and we are in talks with them. To leverage what kind of CDP is better than for the needs of the clients.
Cool. Umberto, we don't want to leave you out.
Well, I think the question was for a pilot, so I don't know what I can add. Not being a pilot, but no, I suppose I suppose the idea is that if given that there's seemingly low adoption of CDPs, it's interesting to see that or to hear that. But certainly, I agree with Philip that there's not one solution fits all. One thing that we've done at Silverbullet successfully over the last 6 years now is help identify the right platform for the right use case, for the right vertical, for the right client. I think there's, the complexity of the Lumascape. If you zoom into the DMP, CDP part of it, there's still a lot of players, and I think that there are valid use cases for particular technologies based on, again, budgetary constraints and verticals and so on. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's important to do the proper due diligence around selection.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. I think just looking at this event, there's so many partners here for clients to choose from. So I think a good question would be to look at like how can clients find the right technology? Like what partner do you think, maybe through Pilot's eyes as well, do you think could help clients find the right marketing or strategy partner to navigate through the sheer offer of technologies and products? I would say us, to be honest, but then I have to say this.
Surprise. Us too.
Yes, exactly, both of us. So come find us after.
I think you need your agencies who will guide you through those things, because that's it. It's not one solution fits all. You need more of those things to go into the future. So it's not just using a CDP and then everything's going fine. And this guidance, I think you will find at your media agencies.
Yeah. Should I?
Nothing to add.
Just looking at the time as well. Philip, are you at Pilot testing any new technologies to help navigate through the demise of the third-party cookie?
We do have some projects regarding those things. We are working on the attribution model side. How can you attribute your campaigns? How can you do that within a cookieless future? And of course, I think you mentioned it, we are a premium partner. So of course we are testing 4D and the contextual thing, because this is, I think, the first thing to run with on the German market. And then, of course, the first-party thing and the first-party data. There's a big solution, and it's more to come. Then I can't tell you more about that. That's highly confidential.
Thank you. So, final question, and maybe Umberto, we start with you this time. What products and solutions do you think clients should really be waking up to? And you kind of alluded to it in your presentation. It's more like today rather than wait another 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think it's more what we said earlier, which is there are solutions there today. It's waiting 12 to 18 months is only going to I think cause more anxiety and panic. We spoke to I'll give you actually a perfect example. One of our agency partners in the United States, which I won't mention, told us on a phone call a couple of weeks ago that I'm paraphrasing here, but it's almost a direct quote, that they're waiting to the last minute and milking third-party data until the very last second. And I'm like, that's great, but what are you going to do about it afterwards? I don't know yet. So, and this is a major holding company, by the way. So it's not, if I'm a client of theirs, I'd be a little bit concerned. So I think the idea is that there are definitely solutions today to look at, to test. I think you have enough time now to have a framework in place of testing and learning different solutions that can work for you, whether it's ID solutions, CMPs, CDPs, contextual solutions. But now's the time, not tomorrow. I think it's literally, you should, after today, go and have a conversation with someone around how you can understand the framework required to future-proof your business today, because it'll happen very quickly. And I think the last point I'd make is, if Google had not delayed the third-party cookie deprecation last time they did, we would already be in it now. And I don't think, from what I saw, most people would be ready for it. So things happen very quickly, and this industry moves very quickly. So I think it's important to just look at solutions now, not wait.
Would you like to add?
I mean, the most smoothest way to run through the cookieless future is to use contextual targeting. So I think this is the first thing to use and the most easiest way to implement. Then, of course, you have to look at the identifier world. How can I use them by my campaigns or by the campaigning? So, of course, you have different devices. You do your mobile campaigns, you do your TV campaigns and stuff. So that's important to look at your campaigns, at your channel that you will campaigning, or where you find your goals. So I think contextual will be the first thing, and then look at the identifiers. First, using of first-party data, it's really still the big thing, and how to implement them in this German market or GDPR market. I think that's the 3 points. And of course, look at the attribution modeling, how you can use it.
Wonderful. So thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much, Umberto. These would be my questions for those guys. So if there's anyone in the audience that has a questions, yes, wonderful. I don't know how. Would you like me to hand the microphone or? Oh, there is one. So yeah, we have the gentleman on the right. He's raising his hand.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, sorry. Hi. It was mentioned a few times about the attribution model on a cookieless future. Are you talking about MMM, or do you have any potential solution regarding the attribution?
That's for you. You mentioned attribution.
The solution, the correct solution of attribution modeling, or what was the question? The company which
No, not the company,
us?
but the way you model the data. Is it with MMM, marketing mix modeling, or do you use any other alternative process in order to find the weight every channel, every touch point should have in the customer journey?
Actually, we are testing both. So yeah, because you have to be ready for that and have to think or have to test it. What works better then?
Okay, thanks.
Yes, another question.
Hey, do you have any solutions for tracking your return of investment? For us, big problem is that tracking in the future for Facebook ads or whatsoever the data will not be handed to us. So how are we getting information if somebody saw our ad and he bought something in my store, for example? Do you have any solutions for that?
So this would be the cross-channel attribution.
Yeah, I would say. I would suggest that when we develop these types of solutions and frameworks for our clients, it's important to what we tend to do is create what we call a measurement framework, which essentially is encompasses and considers not just the immediate investment in ads. That's pretty simple media spend, but also considers the investment in the platforms that support the data collection and deployment. So it's quite a complex framework, but the idea is that we are able to prove or help prove or demonstrate attribution and ROI against the overall expenditure that you've put towards your digital and data transformation journey, and advertising becomes a line item of that framework. In the particular use case you mentioned, there are ways, certainly if you can't get the data out of specific platforms, that makes it a bit more tricky. But overall, there are ways, depending on the platforms that you use and technologies that you leverage, to essentially do as best a job as we can do to help attribute particular, or attribute a particular sale against a particular channel. So I think it's quite tricky, but it does require, and the way we approach it at least, is through a framework model.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Is there another question? Yes.
Hi guys. You mentioned Germany's ahead in terms of consumer products. Where do you think they're behind?
That's maybe a question more for you. You guys know the German market better than I do.
I think, behind. Let me think a minute. The German and the European market is, they are really good they were really good in implementing GDPR and all those data relevancies. But we are behind in just using it. I think the first mover thing. The first mover market is the US American market. The first mover market is, as we've heard about, Brazil. It's also the Nordics. It's the Dutch market is also a first mover market. So there's a lot of things that German clients are really a little bit using their first party data. As I said a few minutes ago, they are using Google platforms. They're using all those American platforms. But they hesitate to use their own first-party data. But why? Because you have those platforms and they are GDPR conform. So don't hesitate to use them. And of course, there's also a kind of waiting because of the fragmentation of the identifier market. So who will win this market? And so this is maybe a German thing, just to wait and just to see what other markets do.
Perfect. It just said 0, 0, 0, 0. So I think we're done. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us today. It's a pleasure presenting in front of you. So have a really, really good day today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.